Michele here, CEO and co-founder of Clearco. She's here to talk to us about her experience, lessons learned as a startup founder, and of course her path in building towards Clearco. Hi, Michele. For those,
Hi.
hey, I'm sure your face is familiar to many people on the call, but just in case you're not aware, I'll do a little blurb here on the intro. She is a tech titan team, serial entrepreneur, started 6 companies before her 35th birthday, this incredible stuff. In addition to being the co-founder and CEO of Clearco, Michele also, you may recognize her from being a dragon on CBC's hit show Dragon's Den. But Clearco is now a double unicorn, valued over $2 billion, has invested over $3 billion in 7,000 plus companies, making it the biggest e-commerce investor in the world. Super impressive stuff. And for skiers out there, little tidbit, Michele is actually on the board of Vail, which is
I
something
am.
she shared with me when we met in person a few years back, which excited me as a skier. Anyways, so excited to have you with us, Michele. Thanks for joining.
Oh, it's great to be here, David. And I don't know if David remembers this, but I think he interviewed me for a job when I was like 22 years old. So a long, long time ago.
Yes, the circles in Toronto and Canada are small. I think we were both at Queens as well.
Yeah,
But
totally.
anyhow, so happy to see you here today. I'm excited to ask you a few questions here. So to kick it off, wanted to kind of go back a bit and hit rewind and have you take us through the very beginning of your journey as a startup founder and serial entrepreneur. What are some of the challenges that you faced? What are some of the learnings that you had at the beginning of your impressive career?
Yeah, I mean, we don't have all day. So I mean, look, this is not an easy career, but it's an exceptionally rewarding one. And so, the beginning of my career, we just dove in, which is I think the only way you become an entrepreneur, right? We I met my co-founder Anatoly in undergrad. We By the time we had graduated, figured out that worldwide supply of sturgeon caviar was down by 95% because the world had overfished the Caspian Sea. And instead of just writing the business plan, we said no to all of our job offers and moved to the East Coast and literally built a fishery from scratch. That's everything it sounds like: boats, fishermen, my hands knee deep in fish, the whole 9 yards. And, that was the beginning. And the things that I actually learned in those early startup days are still the things I learned today. And so if I was to take away, 3 things, it would be you have to continuously be scrappy. And that means getting things done, showing your team you can get things done, rolling up your sleeves. There is no job that is too big for you or too small for you as a startup founder. I mean, CEO, no one told you it stands for Chief Everything Officer. So that's, I think, probably the first thing that I still do today. And even within our company today, when things get overly political and we're not doing this, I'm like, guys, someone pick up the phone and get something done. The second thing I learned is really great innovation comes from a lot of iteration. Like, to get something right, you just have to keep trying and seeing, like, okay, that didn't work, but this part worked. Keep doubling down. I mean, most people are, think Clearco was a giant success. I mean, our e-commerce product was the third product we tried. We had built 2 full companies before we got to this. And so this was my 6th startup. So even when you've done this your whole career, you do not get product market fit on your first product. And then probably the last thing is just, stop planning and to get going, right? There's no amount of planning that will save you. Your plan should fit generally on a Post-it. That's a big enough plan as a founder. And overthinking things does not help you. And maybe finally, this is a career with a lot of no's. 80% of things are going wrong, regardless of what level you're in. Sometimes I even hear my own stats and I'm like, that's impossible, because literally today it's going to feel like a day where 80% of things are working, not working. And, I mean, I love to tell the story, but when we started Clearco, we had this idea of giving, capital and not taking a personal guarantee for doing that. And so, we'd have no debt against the business if a founder didn't pay us back. We wouldn't bankrupt their business, or we wouldn't take their house. And it wasn't VC. We wouldn't take equity. We would do it as a rev share, and we would need your Facebook and all sorts of your data sources to be able to do that. And, Andrew and I went to Wall Street, and we got 200 no's. We got 200 people who were debt investors that said this will never work. And and now all those people come back to us and they're like, wow, you guys have built a category. And I'm like, yeah, but this is what it feels like to build a category. Everyone laughs at you at the beginning. So if that's happening to you, know that that's very, very normal.
Interesting point around even within one startup with the pivots, it could feel like multiple startups. So, in fact, what would be your estimate out of the six that you founded? Was it more like 20 once you added up all those pivots together and looked at it in aggregate?
Oh, it's way more than 20. I mean, I can give you, sometimes you have to understand the scale of fuck up you need to have to like appreciate what it is to be a founder. So, I mean, we're running Bytopia, which is this daily deal site. There's so much competition. We're getting margin compressed everywhere. We're like, we have this massive database. We're like, okay, what else can we sell these folks? So the first thing we try is building scheduling software, which is like a open table, but for everyone but restaurants. So think for spas and for fitness studios. I mean, we built all of this scheduling software. This was like a year of build. We got 100 customers on board, didn't have the right team, couldn't make it work. Like that's the level of like kind of had to throw it all out. Then in the early days, this is like 2014, built an early competitor to Uber Eats. We had 100 restaurants signed up that had our receipt printers in it. You could order takeout, do all of that stuff. I remember selling all these restaurants and just could not make the unit economics on that work. Then that iteration was like, okay, could we build a beauty box company like a competitor to Birchbox in Canada? Super hard. It's very, very difficult to get cheap enough samples in Canada. And then we have really high shipping rates. So like that model didn't work. But it was actually those three iterations that led us to what became SnapSaves, where we were like, okay, but what if we put like coupon redemption on a phone where you just have to take a photo of your receipt? And that app got a ton of traction. We sold it to Groupon in 2014. But like the scale of the things that didn't work are very big. So it's probably closer to like 40 or 50. I think my hit rate is maybe 20% of the stuff we touch starts to work. And so when you're just feeling like that as a founder, when you're feeling like things are not working, that is a constant part of the journey, and you just need to go deeper and deeper into that iteration cycle.
Right. So don't fear that part. It's a part of the process and kind of
Yeah,
push through it to get to the other end. That's
totally.
very insightful. So speaking of pivots, your latest pivot into Clearco as being basically the category leader for this capital, e-commerce business solution
Yeah.
in the fintech space. I imagine you guys must use data quite extensively to get the risk modeling right and to kind
Mm-hmm.
of use all that Facebook data and other sources. And so, interested to hear, as the leader at Clearco, can you share your thoughts on this emerging, I guess it's not even emerging, but growing AI and machine learning space that we're seeing in Canada, especially, and in North America? There's a lot of talent and a lot of movement there. Can you share your thoughts on where you see that space going?
Yeah, I mean, I'm incredibly excited about the space, right? We have been um, a massive, what's that word, like a recipient of like the AI talent, and
Grower, even. We've been
yeah,
growing the
and the
talent.
AI part of our business model. So, look, our idea was like in some ways pretty simple, right? It's like, could we create a category around giving you capital that was solely based on your data? I mean, there is no way on planet Earth we could have done 7,000 deals with founders in 3 years if we were doing any level of the old VC process. We couldn't have met founders. We couldn't have seen pitch decks. We couldn't have done a vetting process. We couldn't have done diligence. We couldn't have done, like, that would just be impossible, right? I mean, a huge VC fund is maybe pumping out like 20 to 50 deals a year, right? Remember when 500 startups was like, oh my God, 500 startups is crazy. So we had to do this all based on AI. So when customers and when founders come to us, they connect us with the sources of data that run their business, right? So their bank account, their payment processor, their e-commerce platform, their ad spend account. We suck in all that data, and within 24 hours can say, look, this is how much capital we can give you, and this is the terms of that capital. And the cool part about this is that when we built this, I was just thinking about the founder. I was thinking about myself. I was thinking about the enormous amount of time that VCs waste. I mean, you basically, when you raise a round, you don't do anything on your business for 3 months. You just deal with like diligence, pitching, getting 100 meetings. And so I was like, I want an option that's fast for founders, because I think a founder's most valuable resource is always their time. So, I mean, if it takes you 10 minutes to connect your data sources, and it's also far more accurate data, right? I don't think I've ever had a VC ask for access to our bank account, which would actually tell you our cash balance really much faster than a
Right.
spreadsheet would with far more inability to kind of move things around to certain
It's not in their
categories.
process though. They're very process driven, right?
It's not in their process. It's it's a for a business that bets on innovation. They haven't. I don't think they've been super innovative, and certainly no one wants to disrupt themselves.
Mm.
But the other thing, David, that was really cool about us doing this, and that I didn't really anticipate, is that we built all of our models on the factors that we thought were originally important, which was unit economics. Are you making money after you sell each of your product, after the cost of your product and the cost of ads, growth rate, things like that. And as a result of that, we look back at our portfolio 3 years later, and it looks incredibly different than a venture portfolio. We've backed 25 times more women than the venture capital industry average, which I think is absolutely insane.
Where's the heart emoticon? There we go. Get that cannon going.
And the most important part about this was not charity, right? This was not, oh, we believe that women are great and therefore we need a specialized fund. This is when you look at data, women have built and created these businesses that absolutely deserve to be funded. And so when you don't see the person and listen to the pitch and add your own biases in and your own learnings from a 30-year portfolio, you actually see that. I mean, a third of our founders are BIPOC. Our founders have extraordinary geographic diversity. When you look at our UK portfolio, 70% of our founders don't live in London. If you looked at a venture portfolio, 95% of those founders would live in London. And so, our mission is that anyone with a great business with great metrics should be able to get capital to grow that business. And that works really well if you're venture funded and you want to give up half the dilution because you're like, great, I'll raise $5 million from Clearco and $5 million from VCs. And it's wonderful if you don't want to take any dilution because you're going to do the work of building your company. But the AI piece was exceptionally important here. And I think AI sometimes, because everyone wants a negative news story. I mean, look, if we had built our data training set on 30 years of VC portfolios, that portfolio would look the same as it does today, right? It would be, white, male, and it would look, like people that had gone to certain schools, right? But you can choose to build something on whatever metrics you want. And so the first iteration was, what Andrew and I thought would be important. And then you kind of let AI do the work. And now people are like, what's in your model? And I was like, I genuinely have no idea because it has rebuilt itself so many times based on, all of these founders. And that's exactly what it's supposed to do. And it's showing us that there's a way better solution.
Yeah, it's interesting and scary the way that AI kind of takes a life of its own. But anyway, that's a different discussion. I love the way that you describe the VC industry, whose business it is to invest in innovation, is in fact not as innovative as many of the investments that they end up making or not making. And the fact that that you found this underserved market that is also moving the boundaries for I'd call it tech for good, right? These societal benefits and underrepresented groups where you're making money and you're also moving the needle on those social elements. So like just fantastic, fantastic stuff. All right. So next question I have is I know when I think about Canadian tech, there's certain companies that create a sense of pride. Shopify, Lightspeed, and Clearco. You guys are operating. You've created a category. You hear about Clearco on the global list of top unicorns in fintech. Like this is a moment that all Canadians should be proud of, if they're not already, in terms of moving the needle for Canadian tech.
Yeah.
So awesome stuff. I want to take it back to our backyard for a minute, though, and talk about Toronto, because Toronto is, experiencing a really great tech moment. There was a great article in the New York Times this week. I don't know if you saw it, but talking about the booming landscape. We're the third biggest hub now in North America. And so I'd love to get your thoughts for the group here on the growing tech scene in Toronto and where you feel it's headed.
I mean, I think there's a lot of credit in this room on, between so many founders that have made this. I mean, I started off as a founder in 2008, and there was 2, 3 kind of venture funds that there was a bunch more name funds, but they weren't putting money out the door. This was still in its absolute earliest stage. So it's been pretty amazing to see Canada grow to this level. And I think it is a huge national importance that we do this, right? Like when people talk about the FANG stocks, you're like, they get a name because they literally become global natural monopolies. That is one of the things we have done in building tech companies. And first of all, Canada should have had a letter. There should have been a B in there for BlackBerry, and that was, a really unfortunate thing. But that is why this sector is so important to be investing in, is because Canada is 2% of the global economy. You can build a really great kind of pseudo monopoly in this country. And we've seen lots of big companies, and that's no shade thrown to them, but we kind of all know who they are in multiple spaces in Canada. But it is far more powerful when you can build a global tech company from Toronto and continue to do that. And we have an enormous amount of potential to do so. And people talked about this for years, and they used to say things that I never understood until I actually had the problem myself. But people would say things to me like, "Well, there's not enough talent here because there's not enough people who have seen a company scale from 100 to $300 million." And I was like, "Oh, that's crazy! Like in a country of 30 million people, there's definitely people that've seen this." Until you're that founder looking for that person, and you're like, "Actually, they don't exist because there's
Right.
5 of them that have seen it, and they all have great jobs in Canada." And so this ecosystem actually builds on one another so powerfully, which is why it's so important we keep building here. And then I think I just, to your earlier comment on businesses that both build and do good, I think I love the comment. I feel very passionate about our social mission, but I think especially sometimes with early stage founders, they get confused. You get the privilege of having a social mission after you've built a great company. And they have to go in that order. They have to go in the order of, does your own company stand on its own 2 feet without a social mission? Can you make money doing that? Can you grow by doing that? And I think that this is important because I see a lot of entrepreneurs get very lost at the early days where something is just a socially mission driven, which is fine, but that's called a nonprofit, or it's called an NGO, or it's called something, or it's a charity. It's very, very different. And I always think you have the best shot of changing the world when your idea gets to scale. Because capitalism has many bad features, but one of its best features is that when you build something big, the market no longer gets to ignore you. And so one of the, I think, profound side effects that we've had, at least in our space, is that we built a product that was better for entrepreneurs to fund their company. And now the market had to react. So, we have a $1 billion competitor in Europe. I mean, you could look at that as like, that's terrible, we have a competitor. I'm like, we created a category out of Canada where this is big enough for other people to copy. We had a moment in 2019 where, it was really us and Brex, another fintech company, that launched the first major capital products that didn't have personal guarantees. And people don't get this unless you've been a founder. A personal guarantee is the nastiest thing you can do to a founder. It says, if you fail, I can take every personal asset you've ever worked for. I can take your house, I can take your kid's education fund, I can take the cash in your bank account. And it's not a joke. They will do that. And I know this because I signed up for PayPal as my payment processor when I was 22 years old. And in size 6 font, it was a personal guarantee on processing. So they were like, if we don't like something, or if you have a chargeback ratio that's too high, we can claw back every dollar you had processed. So I remember being at a point where, 4 PayPal lawyers called me and they're like, you processed $1 million, and being like, I have 10 grand in my bank account. Like, I'm going to be bankrupted forever if you do this. And so no one paid attention to this. Of how nasty these personal guarantees were. They didn't want to do the work to actually understand if these businesses were any good. But the end of my story is that at the end of, I think it was 2019, because we were still in the office, Amex launched their first credit card for founders that didn't have a personal guarantee. Like, the fact that, this little Canadian company and one other fintech put a product out in the market that Amex, the Fortune 50, had to respond to, I think is a mind-blowing amount of impact. And so this is where people get this social impact thing really confused, is they're like, well, I'm going to help a couple of people. That's okay. That's one strategy, and you can use that strategy. But when you build something that challenges the market, everyone's got to respond, and they got to respond really quickly. And to me, that creates more good in competition than I think you could alone. And I'm very happy. I'm happy to see proliferation of our space. I'm happy to see the category get traction. And I'm happy to say we got to invent a lot of that here.
That's so amazing. I mean, I hope everyone here on the call is listening and internalizing what Michele is saying, creating a category out of Canada, not being afraid of global competition, embracing it, leading it. We can do it from Canada. We can. Totally. It's a mindset thing. I think a lot of what people that move to the US learn and end up coming back. I know that talent's in short supply in some areas, but they bring back that Silicon Valley mindset
Yeah.
and that bold vision to go bigger. And I think that's what you and the team are bringing for us in Canada. And just so encourage everybody on the call here, please take that and apply it to your own areas. So I had a question here about, so Intuit's moving we have an office in Mississauga. We're moving it downtown, front of Spadina. There's a new build there called The Well. So we're really
Amazing.
excited about
Beautiful
it.
building.
Yeah, we'll have to have you over once it's
Mm-hmm.
built and finished. But my question is, I saw in Toronto Life last
Yeah.
week an article where you were talking about the excitement that you get when you're back now with folks in the office. But there's also this kind of new world that we're in, this hybrid world where we're trying to give flexibility, and there's a lot of good stuff that has come out of working from home during COVID. Would love to hear your thoughts on how do you get the right balance, right? What are your thoughts about this emerging hybrid space?
Okay, so the first thing I should acknowledge is that I've been completely wrong on this topic many times. I mean, we were an office that I thought everyone needed to be in the office. I was in the office every day. I loved what an office did. I loved the fact that you brainstormed at all hours of the day. You ran into people. You had an enormous amount of creativity. I mean, when we started Clearco, people came to Andrew's in my apartment for the first year and a half of the company's existence. Like I was all about being together because I think it just generated such good ideas. And then COVID hit and I had no choice. So then I was like, great, we're exactly what I don't want to be. We are a remote company. And I think like all great things, you just adapt. And so clearly we figured out how to become a remote company. And I got an enormous benefit of getting to live in different places during COVID, getting to see different people. In a couple of places, we had still set up a war room. So a bunch of us were together in a couple of the times during this. And so right now, my view is how do you create a really good hybrid work environment? So I think teams need to come together once every 2 months at a minimum. And you need to be very thoughtful with that time. This is not like a return to office so you can be in the office. I think that's stupid. You have to have a lot of intention on doing that. And so I think about now, how do we bring our exec team together once every 60 days? I think I love the idea of like, hey, team's going to come in for 4 days or 5 days, and you have individual teams think about how they spend time together. And then you figure out how to do good retreats, because we had these great, twice a year retreats before COVID where you'd really get to know people. Like you go, you get to drink at night, you get to spend time understanding them on a personal level. And so there's no replacement for that. But as soon as you've built that bond, you can do a lot of video calls and you can do a lot of other things. Where you do it. The second thing I think that's really important to talk about in the Zoom world is this endemic. I call it an endemic in our company. I think it's in everyone's company. There are not one meeting occurring at once. There's actually 25 meetings occurring at once. And I literally, at some points in meetings, I tell people to put their hands up. Like get your hands off that keyboard and get your hands off your phone, because we cannot have a conversation where we're solving a problem. In a normal meeting, you would sit there, everyone would turn their phones down, and you'd have a conversation for an hour and you'd solve a problem. Now what you have is, oh, David, can you believe that Jason just said that? Can you believe that just happened in the chat? What is she talking about? Why is she doing this? And you literally I would just love to visualize it. You have like 30 text message chains going on when you have 5 people in a room. And you're like, this isn't productive. You either have the guts to say, I didn't understand what you mean. Let's work this out on the call. But this slinging of the two information meetings, and it's endemic now. It's literally, my phone does it. I do it, and I stop myself from doing it. I'm like, if I am here and I am texting someone else on the call being like, can you believe this person is saying that? I have to have the balls to say, this is not happening. And so that is, I think, the number one problem I've seen in kind of the video call world, is that you can have 18 back conversations happening, and that does not solve problems in companies. Companies are very complicated to run. They are never perfect. And alignment is the single hardest thing to do. And it is so much easier to sling mud at your colleagues than to genuinely solve a problem. And so constantly focusing our teams on that is really important. And so we'll see what this new world is like. The other thing that happened during COVID for us is we're never going to get to go back to the office because we built a global company during COVID. I have
employees
people in Europe. I have 25 people in Australia. I have 50 Americans. Like, there's no I would love to visually see them all in a Toronto office. And I'm like, that doesn't even exist anymore. And so, look, I think like everything else, I had to seriously adapt my way of thinking on this. And I think one more comment on this that I think is really interesting. And I think this is a problem with the press. So all I saw during COVID was all of this negative press on how, COVID set women back, 2 years. And I get it. Like COVID was terrible. And now mothers and fathers were not only doing their jobs, but like teaching their kids how to read. And I have many skills in life, but I do not think I'll be very patient at teaching a child to read. I think there are much better people that can do that than me. And not saying I wouldn't help, but I'm just like admitting that like this is not easy to run a $2
I
billion
have
company
three kids. It's
and
very
try to teach
difficult.
a
Yeah.
child how to read at the same time. These are hard tasks. So all this negative press is done about unpaid labor and all of that, and like people are ignoring the bigger picture here. And there is a very big picture here, which is for basically all of history that we have been in offices, people did not think you were working if you were not working from the office. And I did this, and everyone had this bias. When you were there and when you were there late, you were a hard worker that was committed. And when you were not there or leaving in the middle of the day to go to an appointment or like half in, half out, we kind of thought you were half taking your job, seriously. I mean, this was endemic, and I don't, people can admit to whatever they actually thought, but I think that everyone believed that, you were a better and harder worker if you were in the office. We have completely eliminated this bias. There is now no question that if you are working from home, you are not doing your laundry and like half reading your emails. You are actually working from home. And I think this will put women ahead 50 years because now it's totally normal to go pick up your kid and do a call and be totally attentive to like what's happening on your call. And it's totally reasonable that you are out of the office for half a day when you have to deal with a sick child because you can still do your job. And no one has this bias that you are less worthy or working less hard. And so I think we've missed the big picture here entirely. I think that this is such progress for families and for humanity that we can have some level of being in the office and still being working. I mean, every one of us has a phone. Every one of us is online. Every one of us has to set our own boundaries. And so there should be nothing preventing you from working. But this narrative that this has been so negative, I think is actually wrong. And I think it's incredibly short-sighted. I think for a period of time, yeah, if schools don't exist, your job sucks as a parent. But there's absolutely no way that is lasting. It's not lasting today. And I think the perception of working from home is real work will change everything, especially for women.
I love it. It's all about flexibility at the end of the day, and especially for folks who need the flexibility to kind of even the playing field, not even to put them ahead 50 years, but to just to make sure it's fair. It's a great call out.
Yeah.
Michele, I know you have to jump to something else. I think we're out of time, but
Oh
it's been
no, I like talk too much. If you have one more quick one, I'm happy to do it.
yeah. Actually, any thoughts? Any final thoughts for this group? You've just had such an amazing career. Any as a small business owner, right? As a
Yeah.
startup, any final tips or tricks for the team? Something top of mind that you can share?
Yeah, I mean, just if you're thinking about it, just do it. I know that sounds like such simple advice, but I get so many people. I mean, people on Dragon's Den all the time, and they've been thinking about this for 10 years. I'm like, the world's changed a lot in 10 years. You got to go. There is, never run your life based on embarrassment or based on resume readers. I mean, my career made no sense. I went from, you know, coffee shop to caviar to, e-commerce to coupons to like, fintech. Like people, this would have never made sense to anyone conventional. Um, and then I would constantly focus on spending your time thinking about opportunities versus thinking about complaining. There's many things that go wrong. This is a career that has constant no's, that has constant challenges. That literally, like, there is a new. I mean, I can't even. I started. It was really funny. I started like laughing uncontrollably at dinner with one of my executives the other day, and obviously the supply chain crisis had a decent effect on our business because when you back e-commerce founders and they can't get inventory, they can't sell their products. So we made it through Q4 where we made it through a global supply chain crisis, and he's like, "Why are you laughing?" And I'm like, "Well, I just didn't think we'd make it through a supply chain crisis and like a world war would break out next. Like that was just not on my roadmap of things that we might have to deal with this year." And I think it's important that you just remember to kind of see the humor and absurdity of everything that happens in your business, to remember that every single company that was successful almost went bankrupt 20 times. I mean, this is like Apple, this is Nike, these are the most successful companies we look at. Your journey is no different. And that ultimately you get to have so much impact as a founder. It should make these other things really worth it. And we get to build, I think founders build the world that we want to live in. I think they are more effective than governments. They're more effective than large organizations at building what we want to see. And so uh, it's an important job in society. And I just want to encourage everyone to keep fighting the good fight, because there's been lots of days where I felt like I just couldn't fight another day. And then one day you wake up and you're like, wow, we've actually built something that's of meaningful size and scale. But there's some days it feels like a pretty miserable journey to get there. So keep fighting the good fight.
Yeah, keep fighting. Inspirational stuff. Build that category, everybody. Thank you, Michele, for the great conversation, for spending the time with us today.
All right. Thanks, Michele.